Okay, I remember it was Mervyn Leroy, who was a big producer. And this was the preview showing of his newest movie, The Bad Seed. And those of you that remember that time, that was a very big movie. I had no knowledge of it because this was the first showing. I didn't even know it was being made. But at any rate, I met, we watched the whole movie, and then after the movie, everybody was congratulating everybody else. And off they were, the prince and princess and everybody went back out and up the aisles. And I just sat there, and everybody else followed them. So the theater was practically empty, and I went back up again. And a lot of them were heading back out to Onassis' yacht again for another party. I just followed, and I was partying that night. I think I became very friendly with Princess Grace, because even during the movie, she was talking to me, and she was a lovely lady. I was a young man, and anyway, so that was the experience. And then, of course, when Sam left, about 2 days later, I had been already every night out after that with this countess, young lady, and she and I really hit it off very well. And then, so when Sam left, of course, I had no place to stay. I wasn't leaving yet. And so I stayed in her room with her. That's where I stayed. And I became so friendly with this chauffeur for the Rolls Royce. And he had no other jobs or work, and he would drive us, this countess and I, to places that Sam wouldn't even think of going. I mean, inside the town, and things that were happening and with the people. And what I neglected to tell you was Sam was so angry because when I pulled up in front of the Hotel de Paris in the beginning, and I didn't have a first gear, they took my car and they were able to get it into a parking lot and valeted. And I told Sam what happened, and he was really angry because now he had to, I had to figure out how to get a first gear, and of course he had to pay for it, and he was annoyed at that. He really was. And how did I have to get it? I had to order the first gear from Paris. Here we are in Monaco, and I had to order the first gear from Paris. And by the time, the reason I stayed later than Sam and Dorothy was twofold. Number one, I was having such a good time with everybody, and number two, I had to wait for the gear, and then the mechanics had to pull the transmission and put the gear back in. And after, I guess, almost a week after Sam left, I said goodbye to everybody, and I drove. I had given myself more than a couple of weeks leave, and so I drove back to Italy, and I picked up. Let me see. Oh no, I went down to Rome, and I spent a week or two. No, I spent a couple of days in Rome. I met a couple of Canadian girls who were hitchhiking, and we traveled together for almost a week around Italy. And I went to Napoli. And so finally, I was coming home. And I'm trying to remember how this happened, in the order it happened. I remember I picked up a hitchhiker on the road after I dropped the girls off. We had a big fight about something that I couldn't even think about. This was after 3 or 4 days of living and traveling together. And we had they were going one way and I was going another, and I'm driving up, and here's this young guy, good-looking guy, and he's hitchhiking, and I pick him up, and turns out is he was the welterweight champ of Italy. Now that sounds like a big title. It wasn't. He, they, they don't make any money. He was poor as a church mouse, but he was the welterweight champ of Italy. And he and I became very friendly. Now this is interesting. He couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't speak a word of Italian. But with gestures, and we were almost the same age, we were able to really hit it off. And he finally let me know. I remember now. I met him in Monaco on my way out, and he lived in San Remo, which was on the Italian Riviera, small town, beautiful town. And I went with him, and he took me in and introduced me to his parents and his family, and I spent a couple of days and nights with them. And his mother was the most wonderful woman. And then that's right. Then I drove from there down, and when I picked up the Canadian girls, and we went down to Rome. And a funny thing happened in Rome was that I had no place to park the car, so I parked it right out. I was staying at the hotel. I was at the I can't remember, one of the big hotels in Rome. It'll come to me maybe in the conversation. And I spent, so I parked the car right out front. I got tickets, well, I didn't care. Next day I went down, and the front window was broken, the driver's side, and the car was ransacked. So this went on for 3 nights. Every night I come down, another window was broken. And I asked the doorman, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, you can't park an American car in the streets in Rome." Was it the Ambassador Hotel? I think so, the Ambassadore Hotel. And he said, "You can't do that," because he said, they're going to break in. So I had him write me 4 big signs in Italian saying, "Please, don't break any more windows. The doors are open. Help yourself." Came down the next night, another window was broken. It was so funny. As a kid, I couldn't have cared less. I was having such a good time. And then on the way home, that's when the girls and I got into a little tiff about something. I don't remember what it was. And I dropped them off where they wanted to be dropped off. And I'm heading back. I'm going up the west coast of Italy, West Coast Road. And there were these trees. There were young trees all along the sides of the road. I mean, every 20 feet, another tree, another tree, another tree. And this went on for miles and miles and miles. And I'm driving, and I'm going pretty fast. And I'm going up north, heading north, and all of a sudden, a bee. Now I'm almost ashamed to tell you this. A big bee is in the inside of the window. And this is early in the morning. And I try to open the window. I didn't have to, they were broken, and brush him out. And he wouldn't come out. I mean, he'd jump all over the car, and you hear that noise, and it was driving me crazy. And the only time this ever happened to me is that I got so into getting this bee out of the car that the next thing I realized, I was sitting in the passenger, it was a bench seat, it wasn't buckets. I was sitting in the passenger seat trying to get the bee out, and suddenly I realized nobody was driving the car. And oh God, and I look out the front window, and there's one of these trees coming right at me. And next thing I know, I crash, bam, the car is overturned, we're rolling, and the car was totaled, but I ended up upside down, pinned under the car, and I was lucky because I was in a ditch. And the car now had rightened itself up, but had me pinned like this in the ditch underneath. And I had taken the tree and cut it in half, and the tree gutted, I think, the front or rear axle, the stump of the tree gutted the axles. So the car was just sitting there on me. Really not on me, on the ground, and I'm looking, and I can hardly move, and all I see is the battery swinging back and forth on one cable. And every time it hit the other cable, there'd be a spark, and a spark, and all I could smell was gas. And there was gas. Well, this was early in the morning, and when this happened, there was nobody on the road. And I don't know how many hours went by, but I would hear things outside, and finally the battery stopped doing that, but I had gas in my mouth, and I was pinned under this car. And it turned out it was about 5 hours before all of a sudden I could hear this big heavy machine, and they brought in a crane, big crane from Rome, and they picked this car up straight up about 4 feet above me. And I jumped up and I got out and I couldn't light, and I looked around me. They had the entire thing roped off, and there must have been 100 people. And this one woman was standing there with her rosaries. And when they saw me, they started crossing there. So God, they thought I was dead. I couldn't talk because I had gas in my mouth under it. And the first thing I did was reach into the car, pull out my Rolleiflex camera, and I had a Leica, and I started taking pictures of the car, the way it was. And this went on, I don't know, an hour, and I'm doing this and doing that and clearing everything out of the car. The car was totaled. My beautiful black Ford. And the next thing I know, a woman, an American tourist, a woman, and her husband asked me how was I going to get where I was going, and so I said, well, I have to get back to Germany. And they said, we'll drive you up to Livorno. Is that the name of it? Livorno, where you'll pick up the train, and that'll take you back to Germany. And so I was really very pleased with that. And as I'm getting into their car with my stuff and my cameras, and I had very expensive cameras, which I mostly won in poker games or gave cigarettes for. Germany was quite different back then. This was 1956. An American MP with his MP thing. I don't know what he was doing there. And he was in a Jeep. He said to me, can I buy your engine? And I said, yeah. He said, I'll give you $10 for your engine. So he gave me the $10, and I sold it. I gave him the car. I jumped in this car, and everybody was clapping and cheering for me. And the Italian police were busy writing everything down. And I took off. And I went back to Germany. Well, as a postscript, let me tell you, for the next 20 years, I would get nasty letters and bills from Italy, the country, for the tree. They were, and to pay duty on the car that I brought in and didn't bring out. A big American car in those days, you paid a lot of duty on it if you sold it in Italy. And of course, I didn't pay attention to it, but that went on for 20 years. They would bill me every year, maybe twice a year, for the tree, and then the customs or whatever it was from Italy would bill me, would demand that I pay the duty on that I owed them for leaving the car there. That was just one funny thing, a great trip that I had. I got back to Germany in one piece. Minus one great car. Of course, you didn't have insurance in those days in Europe. And I will add that just before I came home, and of course I had Hungary and Israel in between what I'm telling you now, but I'm telling it to you out of order because I remember it. Just before I came home, I was involved in a poker game in Germany, in Frankfurt, and I was pretty good at poker in those days, and I ended up winning a man's Mercedes 300 SL. He put it up as collateral for his hand, and I don't remember what I put up. Well, it certainly wasn't valued at that, because back then in '56, a Mercedes 300 Gullwing SL was worth about 10 grand. To put that in perspective, the finest Cadillac you could buy was worth about 5 grand. This was back in 1956. And I won it. I won the hand, I won the car. So when I came home by ship, and I had the car transported back to the United States about 3 weeks after I arrived by MATS, M-A-T-S, which was Military Air Transportation Service. And if you were as GI, they did that for nothing. And so I had the car sent back to here. It was gorgeous. It was silver gray. And I think it was in 1950, I'm not sure, 55, 56, I can't remember. But it's a classic. Today that car would be worth close to $300,000, if not more. And I remember the very first day I had it home, I piled all my camera equipment in the back and went up to visit my sister who lived in Riverdale, up in New York. And I ran upstairs, and they were so happy to see me, and I was only there for about an hour. When I came down, the car was gone, and I never saw it again. I never saw my camera equipment again. I was 22 years old, 23, and the world couldn't, was my oyster. And of course I didn't have any insurance on any of that. So there you have it. I will go on now in a while and talk to you about Hungary, and talk to you about Israel, and a few other things that I can remember. I don't remember whether I did talk to you about Hungary and Israel. But at any rate, this is so far what I can remember of my life, and I had quite a wonderful young life, very, very exciting. I was an idealist, and I believed in ideals, much more probably than I do today. But that was good times in my life, and I thought that might be interesting to put on this tape too. Okay, thank you.